Hello, and welcome to the Greater Philadelphia Jewish Film Festival in Conversation. My name is Gary Kramer, and I'm a film critic for Salon.com and the Philadelphia Gay News, among other publications. It is my pleasure to moderate this conversation with Eytan Fox, the acclaimed Israeli director and co-writer of SUBLET, and the star of the film, the Tony Award-winning actor John Benjamin Hickey. Welcome, John and Eytan, to GPJFF.
Thank you very much.
This film, SUBLET, was sponsored by Barbara and Mickey Black, as well as Edward and Susan Hoffman. And if you liked this film, I encourage you to see the other queer-themed films at the festival, Trans Kids, Shiva Baby, Tahara, and On Broadway. I first saw SUBLET back in the spring when it was supposed to play at this Tribeca Film Festival. I identified way too much with Michael, the John Benjamin Hickey character, a New York Times travel writer who writes about the city as it is. And like Michael, I was intrigued by Tomer, Niv Nissim, the film's student whose apartment he sublets and whom he befriends over the course of the film. I like the exchange of ideas between the millennial and the mature gay man. But for me, SUBLET is best when Michael gets out of his comfort zone, which happens a few times in the film. And Hickey gives a wonderfully understated performance. If I had seen SUBLET without credits, I would have known it was an Eytan Fox film. After I had seen his feature Yossi and Jagger nearly 20 years ago, I've been an admirer of this out-gay Israeli filmmaker. He tells stories where two very different characters form relationships and help each other to see the world and their lives more clearly. In addition to Yossi and Jagger and its sequel Yossi, made 10 years later, his films Walk on Water and The Bubble, and now SUBLET, follow this narrative path. Moreover, Fox coaxes a terrific performance out of his actors. John Benjamin Hickey gets a low-key role here, and I love the way he absorbs everything Michael encounters in Tel Aviv. It's a very internal performance and shows why Hickey should headline more films. His character is going through a difficult time at home, but he masks his quiet despair as he connects with Tomer, a young man who challenges him and makes him see the world anew. Hickey conveys the same qualities in two of my favorite performances of his, on stage in Dada Woof Papa Hot, as well as in the 1998 film Finding North. But the actor may be best known for his work in Love, Valor, and Compassion, both on stage and screen, as well as his Tony-winning role in The Normal Heart. He's currently nominated for a Tony for his work in The Inheritance. All right, now that we're acquainted, I want to ask 9 questions to our guests, 3 for each of them and 3 for both of them. I'm going to alternate, and after that, we'll open it up to the audience for your comments. So Eytan, as I mentioned in my introduction, many of your films put contrasting characters together. And this, of course, makes for good drama. There's a generation gap between the leads, and they fuss over monogamy, film genres and musicals, Germany, pajamas, and more. What decisions did you make with you and your co-writer when you came up with Michael and Tomer and their characteristics? Because I think it's that friction between the two leads that make the films so engaging.
So as you said, it makes for good drama when you put together two very different characters, or seemingly very different. And when I started working on SUBLET, I turned 50. And I said, okay, I'm not a young man anymore. And I want to examine that. I wanted to understand that. And I thought the way to do that would be to put me together with a young man who's from a different generation, a different world. He is a young Israeli, a Jew, a gay young man, but he's 25 and very different than who I am as a 50-year-old Israeli Jew gay man. Film director, yes, Tomer is a film director, among other things. So I said that would be a very interesting to kind of way to examine who I am now, what issues I care about, to redefine who I am as a man and as a filmmaker. That was a device to do that, to put me, very close to Michael's character, to John's character, to put me opposite a young man who's not me anymore, and to see what happens.
And what did you learn about yourself doing that?
That I'm not 25 anymore. That I think I'm kind of happy about not being 25 anymore. But their life is very interesting, and there's a lot of things to learn from younger generations,
millennials.
Yeah, millenniums, but there's also a lot to teach them it's not only to learn from them. It's like, and I was trying to be not judgmental at all and to really learn from people I was working with, from our wonderful actor, Niv Nissim, and not be judgmental. But then again, say, okay, but I have all this wisdom and this history that I bring with me, and I can introduce all these things to you and teach you. And, you know, this meeting of ideas, of feelings, of energies is what the film's about.
Well, to that point, John, what I love about your performance is how understated it is. And Michael's quiet and thoughtful and pensive. He soaks up his surroundings. He's observant. There are hints of his past revealed in the film, but your performance suggests a life that's not jaded, but deep. Can you talk about how you saw and approached his character? Because he's very open to what he sees in Tel Aviv, but at the same rate, you know he's got more going on than what he presents.
I think he wants to be more open than he is, actually. He wants to be more intrepid than he is. He is a travel writer, after all. I think he considers himself a very intrepid, well-packed human being. But he discovers so much about himself through this young man. And what you guys were just talking about was making me think about why I was so attracted to what Eytan created, this dynamic between these two people. Because when you fall in love with a character in a wonderful script like this, it's as much about the other people as it is about you and your character. And, you know, I love this idea because Eytan and I are close to the same age. I'm a few years older, of like a gay man who is 55-ish years old, looking at how happy he is in his life, despite all that he has been through. And there is tragedy in this movie, as well as a lot of great laughs too. And because of everything he's been through, the AIDS calamity, death, and what the millennials are going through, which is all of this freedom. I think Michael finds himself standing outside of his own life, like a lot of gay men my age, standing outside their lives, knowing how fortunate they are to still be here, God knows, just on the planet. But to have made it this far, to have all the freedom that we have, and looking at the younger generation and seeing what's afforded them. And so you're kind of standing on the outside, looking in a little bit. And that's what I loved about Michael. And I think that's what's, how you describe understated about him, is he observes more than he engages. And that's was a big challenge for me, because I think I'm much more of an engager than I am an observer. And Eytan had to mold that with me. I'd also just been playing the West End in The Inheritance. So I was playing to 1,200 people a night, and got to Tel Aviv and was working in this tiny little set. And Eytan was like, talk more quietly, you're talking too loud. But yeah, it's a deeply internal character. And I love that you learn about him, you learn stuff about him without being told what those things are until almost to the very end of the movie.
Yeah. Well, one of my thoughts about the relationship between Tomer and Michael is that the power shifts constantly back and forth between them. They both see something they want in the other. And I'm curious, who do you think, and this is for both of you, who do you think is in control in the relationship? Because at some points I think it's Michael, at some points I think it's Tomer. And I think that impacts the scene and what the dynamic between them is.
Eytan.
I'm going to let you start, Eytan. Yeah.
I think you were right to say it shifts throughout the film. Michael is the father to Tomer, and at some points in the film, Tomer is a father to Michael. Right. So it's this, relationships are complicated, and people take roles, and sometimes reverse roles, and dynamics change. And so I think, that it's clear, obviously, Michael, John's character, could be more of a father than Tomer, than Tomer can be a father to Michael. But Tomer is, at certain points of the film, very...
Well, he's a teacher in a lot of ways.
Yeah. He becomes his guide.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, he becomes his guide, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that like I said, that's the dramatic pivots of when that shift changes that make the film so interesting, because you think, Michael's sort of taking it in, and then he suddenly becomes in charge, and vice versa, with Tomer. Even the scene on the beach, it's like you expect him to just sort of like, this is how my sexuality is. It's very fluid, and I'm not into monogamy. And then all of a sudden he's like, is that your boyfriend? And are you dating? And is this, a relationship or what? And it's just the back and forth is what creates like I said, the friction and the dynamic between them.
Yeah, nothing is overt. I think that's one of the interesting things about the movie is, and one of the things I really was drawn to about it is that it's, and when you were describing all of Eytan's movies, Yossi and Jag, which is, I think, just a masterpiece. It's like none of them are overtly gay, whatever that means, overtly political. Like he lets the audience figure out who the leader is, who the follower is. It's never overtly sexualized. It's two men who are trying to figure each other out on very sophisticated levels. On all different kinds of levels. And that's what really drew it to me. It wasn't just a comedy or a dramedy about a May-December sort of thing, which that's there, those elements are there, but it's got so much more on its mind and in its heart than that.
Yeah, and I think it's the subtlety that Eytan's work doesn't spoon feed you what to think. It says, here's presenting this interesting relationship. You decide what you want out of it, who's in control.
I actually I remember when we were first working and they were dressing the set in Tomer's apartment, and I was like, are you going to have, there were some maybe Trump bobbleheads or some BB bobbleheads, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Eytan, but I think he kind of got rid of that and said, I don't want to make this movie specific. It's all there. We don't need to tell the audience that Tomer is an anti-Trump, BB, like let them figure that out without us telling them what this is. Let the politics come from the characters. And I think that's one of the subtle, beautiful things about them.
We did have a little Trump doll or whatever it's called, but we didn't close up on it. But we did have one just to feel that.
No close-ups for Trump.
Yeah.
Well, John, you mentioned the word intrepid earlier. I mean, Michael is taken out of his comfort zone at the beach during the sex scene and even at the kibbutz. In what ways are you intrepid?
I think I'm a lot more like Michael in that I think I'm very intrepid, but sometimes I'm happier just looking at a coffee table book of Rome and staying in the comfort of my own, on my own sofa. I think I'm very intrepid in my work. I love to go on adventures. I like to think of jobs as adventures. Sometimes jobs you have to take them to make some money or whatever. But for instance, this job, I mean, the great Israeli director whose work I was so incredibly fond of gets in touch with me, what is it now, like 3 or 4 years ago, through my agent, and says, I've written this script. I wrote it with John in mind. And I mean, before I even read it, and we would shoot it in Tel Aviv, I was like, wow, this is my opportunity to go and immerse myself in a land and culture that I've known about my entire life. My partner's Jewish. We had been once before, but only kind of quickly, glancingly. So it was like my journey as an actor paralleled, Michael's trip there, but Michael went maybe a little, tighter than I did because of what had gone on in his life. I went with such abandon because I was like, holy shit, I'm getting paid to be in an Eytan Fox movie and eating in Tel Aviv. Oh my God, the food. We said this before, I gained weight during the movie. And they shot our nude scene at the very end. I was like, damn it, Eytan. I mean, the food, it's the best food I've ever eaten in my life. It's an extraordinary city, and it is a mass of contradictions and complications, and I was drawn to all of it. So yeah, I think I'm intrepid as an actor more than I am as a human being.
Okay, most actors are actually.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here smiling, looking at John talk about the film. This is a wonderful present you're giving me to hear this amazing actor and person talking about what we've done together. We haven't had a chance to do this, you know, since we shot the film. We were supposed to meet in Tribeca, where the film had its world premiere, but you know, with COVID and everything, they didn't really have a festival, and we didn't come to New York. We didn't meet John. We didn't have this closure, which is so needed to talk about the film, to celebrate it, you know. And so now I'm just listening to John, and I can't stop smiling.
Really, and to be with a group of people watching it, you know, that's how you know what you've made. I mean, so for Eytan, for all of us, it's been, of course, heartbreaking, but this has been so gratifying to get just to talk to people about it and what it means to us.
Well, Eytan, your film features writing and books, film scenes, an art gallery, museum, dance scenes, food scenes, music. What can you say about incorporating all of these cultural elements in your film? Because Tomer and Michael could have bonded over anything, but you resist tourism for something that has a lot more personal connection and meaning for the characters. And I want to talk about that because I loved how, you know, we got to see dance, we got to go to a restaurant, we got to, you know, go to a gallery or museum, we got to, you know, listen to the music, even in a cab on the way to the, you know, sublet. Can you talk about that? Because I think incorporating so much of Israeli culture in the film is really important.
Well, I think I try in all my films, but even more specifically in Sublet, to be as close as possible to my world, to our world. And so, you know, culture, dance, theater, books, galleries, museums, food are very much part of my life and of John's life. So I thought, you know, and of Tel Aviv, and of Tel Aviv's life. So I wanted to, you know, incorporate that into the film. I think, you know, that's what people do when they travel abroad. Also, they try to do all these things. And someone said to me, one of the nice things about watching Sublet now, of all times, is that none of us can travel anywhere, you know, with COVID and everything. So the film kind of gives you an opportunity to actually travel to Tel Aviv and be there for at least an hour and a half, and experience all these things that Michael experiences and that you can experience in Tel Aviv. Yes.
Well, yeah, that was one of my questions is, you know, John, I mean, you sort of hinted at earlier, you know, what do you remember about falling in love with Tel Aviv? But Eytan, what do you think is special about New York? Because I know you've been to New York a number of times. So I'm going to put you both in your other cities and have you talk about the qualities of the properties that you get abroad as opposed to at home.
Well, I remember, you know, coming to New York to see theater. That was, you know, and saw John. I remember Love, Valor, Compassion. It was off Broadway when I saw it. And it was such an amazing experience that I can't forget. So theater, art, culture is something that I think of when I think of New York. Great food. A lot of things that John was mentioning about Tel Aviv, I feel about New York. When I go to the Upper West Side, I feel close to my childhood and my parents.
Right. You were born there.
That as well, you know, just feeling close to where I come from, my family, my childhood. Central Park. I don't know, so many wonderful things about New York. I'm waiting for when we can fly again and come to visit my. You know, both my brothers live in America. So I want to come visit New York, which I love, and them, and John.
Yes. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that the movie is a wonderful vicarious pleasure. It's a great substitute for what's missing in so many of our lives right now, which is travel, which is getting off of an airplane and wheeling your luggage into a whole new experience. And, you know, when I think of both cities, when I think of Tel Aviv and that extraordinary 6 weeks I spent there, it's the bubble factor, you know, that like, it's no secret that both of those cities are liberal bastions and these meccas for people who live outside of that city, who look at it like a beacon in the night. Like, I want to be there. When I was a kid in Texas, in a small town in Texas, I didn't even know I wanted to be an actor, but I knew I wanted to be in New York City. You just saw it on TV, and I don't know whether it was the gay thing or the artsy fartsy part of me, whatever it was. I was a kid in Plano, Texas, who saw New York on TV and was like, I want to go there. And I did at 18, 19 years old. I came to school here and never left. I've been here over 40 years now. So I felt that same, God knows, that same kind of energy in Tel Aviv. That it's this tiny little, it's Oz, you know.
Okay, so let's talk about sex. First, there is that grinder scene in the film, which is both sexy and uncomfortable. But there's also a sex scene between Michael and Tomer. I kind of didn't want them to hook up because I thought their connection was so much more emotional than physical, but I want to talk about the sexual nature of their characters and their relationship, because I think the film sort of pivots on that scene. It's not necessarily that they're going to be lovers and have that connection. It's just more an emotional connection that extends physically for them. Can you talk about that? Because I think it's a very interesting moment in the film.
Gary, I just want to be sure people who are seeing us now watch the film and know what we're talking about. Yeah, is that the case?
I'm assuming so.
Okay. I want to understand how detailed I'm supposed to be here, or explain what was going on and so on. We said this before. You know, relationships are complicated, and they have all kinds of aspects and layers, and sex comes in. You know, and it's part of our relationships. And you know what I liked when I was talking to the Frédéric Boyer, who runs the Tribeca Film Festival, and when he saw our film, he said what he loved about it is the fact that their sex scene does not change their relationship. Right. You know, you would think, you know, oh my God, they've become physical or sexual, and now everything's going to change, and you know, that's not what happens. It's just another aspect of their relationship, and another expression of their love and of this closeness that they found, and this relationship that they found.
And they don't jump each other's bones either.
Right.
I think that's very
well, it's a slow burn.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, and correct if you disagree, I think Tomer kind of initiates it. He becomes the father in that scene. Right. He becomes the person who sort of knows on some instinctual level what a balm this would be for both of these men, how healing it will be, and he knows it on some level that Michael maybe doesn't understand because he's so scared.
Yeah. It was I think to me it was a way for them to both sort of get over their emotional struggles and to sort of connect in a way that, even though it was physical and there was love attached, it wasn't a romantic thing that was going to extend, as Eytan suggested, but it was something they both needed. It was an expression or an outlet for them to feel a physical comfort versus an emotional one, because they were emotionally so torn.
It's a wonderful thing that happens, because the other sex scene is a scene where Tomer hooks up with a guy on Grindr, and Michael very I don't think with any great discomfort excuses himself from that possible three-way. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think Eytan left that a terrific mystery. Like, what could have happened? I mean, Michael's in his PJs, for goodness sake. I said to Eytan, I was like, really? I have to be in pajamas? I know better than this. He's like, yeah, but Michael doesn't necessarily. Like, that's not why he's there. He's not as, alpha as you might be. And not that I am, but it's like, but he is responsible for his own boundaries, Michael. And so when he lets his guard down at the end, it's, I think, all the more poignant and beautiful a connection between the two of them, because they don't just jump each other's bones. I mean,
yeah, and I think that's the emotional. That's why it's an emotional connection as opposed to just merely a physical one.
Yeah.
It's where I think physical and emotional come together. In the film, Tomer's life consists of many encounters with men which are only physical.
Right.
And he kind of doesn't know how to connect between the emotional and the physical.
Right.
And this is a moment in the film and in Tomer's life where maybe for the first time in his life, these things come together, you know, and that's why they're so powerful, so strong, and so meaningful for Tomer and for Michael, of course.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why the after effect of that scene is so powerful and quietly powerful, you know. So my last question before we open it up, I think it's interesting that during his stay, Michael sees the world through Tomer and his friends. He gets caught up in their drama, his girlfriend, the guy and his mom at the beach, the bike being stolen. Can you talk about what it means to refract your experience through meeting or watching someone else? Because one of the things I appreciate about the film is how we see life through someone else's eyes and experiences. And I think you as an actor, John, and you as a filmmaker, Eytan, are doing this professionally. You see the world through somebody else's, you know, eyes or experiences, or you inhabit them through the characters you write or perform.
Well, John can tell you maybe about a very interesting relationship that was created and happened between him and Niv, the actor, which was very nice to watch. I was jealous, but you know, where the two actors were really enjoying each other's company and becoming close friends, and I had to look at everything from afar.
Tell them about Shabbat, the dinners, the Shabbat dinners.
Yeah, John was invited to Niv's family, and they spent Shabbat together. John, you tell your experience.
I went to Eytan's family's in-laws and had the most incredible time and loved them. And then I went to Niv's families, and I think I just went to Niv's families a few more times on Friday night.
You had a better time there. That's what happened.
And Eytan was like, and it just, I when you talk about, you know, the refraction and the, like, what happened to Michael at the kibbutz when he goes and meets Tomer's mother and kind of opens up. I mean, I didn't have that kind of emotional, you know, thing with these, but they became like a family to me. It became this incredible synthesis of character and actors. And I just have to say too that I just so loved working with Niv. Eytan and I both. Eytan worked, of course, so closely with him in pre-production, and because it was his first film, he was still in acting school. But I think a good actor never comes to the table, to the job, thinking, oh, well, he doesn't have experience, I do, so I'm going to be able to. I don't think anybody knows anything when they go into a situation, like a creative situation, and you figure out what it is as you go along. And then at the end of it, you're able to describe what the thing is. But if you go in thinking you know it all, and I learned as much from him as he could ever possibly have learned from me. He was deeply professional and disciplined and skilled, but just had such a wonderful open heart, the same way Tomer does. And so much of what you see in the movie is just me kind of loving that young man and loving his acting. He's
really charismatic.
Yeah, amazed by how charismatic, but just how talented he was, how take after take after take, he was able to just be right there and be so present. And a lot was being asked of him. And Eytan is a taskmaster. He's not, it's not like it's a very demanding and exacting day at work when you're working with him. And we gave ourselves to him and to that. And I think Niv is just extraordinary.
Eytan, any comments?
Eytan's family's food every bit as much as Niv's family's food. Again, they're the reasons why I'm maybe a little chunky in the movie.
Eytan, any comments?
Just that it was wonderful to watch, life imitating art, art imitating life. I mean, to see this relationship between John and Niv become, what it became, and to think how wonderful that is and how close to what happens in the film, and for John to be saying that he learned from Niv, is wonderful to hear. I mean, Niv will be thrilled to hear that he's heard that in the past. But you know, it's like yeah, because you would think that what is John Benjamin Hickey, who's done so much wonderful theater and television and film and so on and so forth, a Tony Award winner and so on. What could he possibly learn from this young boy in Tel Aviv who's still in acting school and stuff? And so it's clear what Niv could learn from John. But here you have John saying, I looked at this young man and I learned from him. And I was, you know, I was looking at him and I learned from him and it was so exciting for me. So that's partly, and we're going back to the beginning of our discussion, what the film's about, is how these two very different people come together and try to listen to each other and see each other and eventually learn from each other. And through learning about each other, they learn more about themselves. So
I love also that travel is not about, you know, a good travel writer. You don't see the country through its culture. You see it through its people. When you meet the person, you meet the country. And that's, I think, what's so beautiful about the film and why it's such an important movie about Israel, Tel Aviv, which is, of course, an incredibly complicated piece of land, you know. But I think that meditates on that beautifully, like know the people.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question from one of the guests, participants. The film and its message are beautiful and the music choices were excellent. After I watched the film, the writer says, I went and listened to both Lost Soul and One Day because of how much passion they had within them. How did you choose the music that would assist in telling the story? And what was it that made you say, yes, that was the song, I want to bring it to the scene and that will bring life to it even more? So Eytan, this is for you.
Music, and more specifically songs, are very present in my films. And I think, you know, this playlist that we came up with really tells the story of Tel Aviv and of Israel. It's a very, you know, it's a mix of different, you know, kinds of music that represent different kinds of cultures, different kinds of people. There's more kind of Middle Eastern music and some Arab music and American music and Israelis trying to be American, and all this mix that comes together and creates the soundtrack of Tel Aviv and of Israel. So I'm happy with what we did there with the songs and the music. It's really captures that. Yeah.
But you've used songs before in your work because of the what was it, Cupcakes with the Israeli Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah.
You know, and so music's kind of very important in your film.
I also remember when we would rehearse, we would meet in this little, common space in a hotel, and that I was staying in and rehearse. And Eytan brought like his iPhone and would play while we were doing the dialogue. He'd play the song that would be under it, or that he would hope would be under it. And I'm so inspired by that because I think actors need all the help they can get. You know, music makes the scene, and as a great filmmaker understands that, and I also, it's great when they have great taste in music, and Eytan does, and it's off center, it's not stuff you've heard before, it's got great verisimilitude.
I want to tell you, some of the music is music I never heard before, because I was planning on using our music, John, like Michael's music, right. Bob Dylan and Johnny Mitchell. You know, that was what I wanted to use. And then I met all these people who were helping me, younger Tel Avivians, and said, what are you talking about? No one listens to that music anymore in Tel Aviv or in the world for that matter. Let us introduce you to all these new things happening. And they were not talking necessarily about Ariana Grande. They were talking about all these young people working in Tel Aviv. All these things, this Ethiopian group, and, you know, Arab music and collaborations between, you know, Palestinians and Israelis, and all this new music coming out of Israel that I knew nothing about. They took me to clubs to listen to this music and sent more and more songs to me, and it was really, I learned a lot from the Tomers of the world, from the young men of Tel Aviv and women of Tel Aviv, of course.
Let me ask you a question about space, because the sublet itself is a bit of a crucible for the characters, but you also go to wide open spaces like the beach or to the city streets, but also to closed off spaces like the club, for the club scene or some of these dance or theater performances. But I like the way that the space is used in the film, as I said, as a crucible, but also to tell or inform the characters. You mentioned earlier Tomer's, the production design of his apartment, for instance, or the sort of atmosphere you get walking through the streets as he goes to find different types of food. Even the bakery has a different feel to it. Can you talk about creating the space in the film? Because I always find that interesting. It informs the characters.
Yeah. So we try to shoot as much as possible on location in the real places where these things would happen. Again, I was talking about specific neighborhood where Tomer should live, and then these young people that were my consultants was saying, that's 20 years ago. That's where young people lived 20 years ago. We'll take you to this new place in these new rundown neighborhoods downtown where, that you never go to, because you're this, uptown boy,
right.
whatever. So, so we try to be as much as possible in those places.
You created the apartment, though. You had to build that set.
Yeah.
That was the only set that was a set.
Yeah, exactly.
Weren't you going to have you had a real apartment, but then you...
Yeah, we did, and that kind of fell through for some reason, and I said, oh my God, I want this to be real. I want it to be a real Tel Avivian apartment, a rundown Tel Avivian apartment, and then our wonderful production designer Neta came to me and said, I promise you, we'll work very hard and we'll create in a studio an apartment that will look like Tomer's apartment, like a young Tel Avivian's apartment. And I think she did a very good job. I'm very happy. It doesn't look like a studio or anything.
It's great.
Right.
I think we were better. I think that was one of those God's rejection, God's protection. I think when we ended up having much more space to move the camera around and could breathe a little bit more.
Yeah, it didn't feel claustrophobic.
Where none of us could breathe. We had there's a whole scene where a very long dialogue when they're sitting, I don't know, on this porch, and they're sitting and they can't move, and none of us could move yet.
Yeah. That was
Okay. Another question we had, have you ever thought, Eytan, about bringing a true story to life or telling something in a semi-fictional narrative? Whose story would you want to tell? Because there's so many opportunities. A lot of your films are sort of, ideas you have and you write them as original scripts, but would you ever want to adapt a sort of biography type or tell true crime or something like that? Get out of your comfort zone a little bit?
I don't want to get out of my comfort zone. You think that it's like a panic attack that starts. No, I don't have to do that necessarily, but I could think of true stories that are still in my comfort zone, and I am working on a very controversial story. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about SUBLET, only about SUBLET. That would be interesting. To take a character, maybe even a biblical character, I've been learning Tanakh and Bible and Talmud and all these Jewish studies lately, and there's such amazing characters in the Bible that demand a film or some kind of
Well, an allegory is always useful. I mean, you could tell it that way too.
Totally.
So I was going to ask about your next projects, and you obviously won't speak about them, Eytan. But let's talk about queer cinema then. You've established yourself as this gay Israeli filmmaker, and a lot of your films, sort of fit this box. Do you want to continue in that sort of capacity, or do you want to expand to tell, non-queer stories?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you'd ask a straight director, do you want to make a film that doesn't have straight characters, or it's not about straight characters, doesn't have a woman in it?
I do think a lot of straight filmmakers make incredible gay movies, and I think it's their sort of outsider, perspective that sometimes can bring a lot of sensitivity to it.
Yeah.
But I also know that we're pigeonholing a lot of queer cinema, and that's sort of been less true in the recent years. But back when you first started filming, it was very rare.
Yeah, exactly. I've had straight heterosexual relationships in my films and wonderful characters who were not gay. But I think, because I try to make films about myself and my world,
Mm-hmm.
I find it very difficult to think of a film that does not have a gay character in it. Doesn't necessarily have to be the lead or the main character, but it will feel not real, not authentic to have a film or create a world that did not have LGBT characters in it. It would feel, it would feel strange to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's sort of what I anticipated, which is part of why I asked the question.
Yeah.
But to you, John, you play all different types of characters, and how did you sort of get into this idea of playing either specifically gay roles or playing all kinds of roles or doing different projects?
I think it's an incredibly interesting question for right now, for someone like me. And, I would say, like, I've been an actor professionally for 30 years and worked for 30 years. And I would say for 27 of those years, I was very, whether I liked it or not, and I didn't particularly like it, me and my agents and my team and my people around me kept a list: gay parts, straight parts. You've played too many of these. You need to do something here. I'll admit that. There was a certain homophobia, not so internalized, that drives choices like that. And you hear it from people around you. And, and nobody kept that score more than me on certain levels. And that's changed. It really has changed. I see now the fact that, and I didn't come out 25 years ago as a professional actor. I wasn't Brad Pitt. I wasn't like, starring in movies. And I was a journeyman. I was more of a theater actor just by virtue of the fact that I lived in New York. But, I wanted to be in a Terrence McNally play. I wanted to be in a Paula Vogel play, Craig Lucas, Tony Cushman.
Yeah.
These were my heroes. And we were living through the calamity then. Like, to not come out seemed really wrong to me. So anyway, it wasn't like it damaged my career in some ways, but it can pigeonhole you. It certainly can, even as a character actor. But it really has changed, and now I sense sometimes that I'm being rewarded for something I did 20, and I never asked to be rewarded for it. But it's sort of like, oh wow, I got that thing. Somebody offered me this because I get it. And there's a reckoning, isn't there? Like now, in our culture, we're looking at whether you call it gay cinema or cinema, and there's more of a demand, like, make sure you try your best to put a gay actor in the gay part. And I don't believe that has to happen. I think you hire the best actor for the part. And I don't give a damn if that person's gay or straight, but we're seeing more and more a demand to see as much of the authentic person playing that part. And that's a great thing. At the end of the day, I still think you cast the best actor, but I've seen a real shift, and it's no longer necessary in my, conservative brain at times to keep that track, that score. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and one of the reasons I asked that question is because I've seen in the, even with the LGBT festivals, film festivals, there's a lot more diverse voices and diverse filmmakers coming out than there were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think, having films like Sublet play a Tribeca, where it's a Jewish film festival, it's not seen as pigeonholed or ghettoized because it's a gay film. And I think that's really important because it gets a lot more exposure to people who need to see stories like this.
Yeah. And Niv and I are both openly out, proud gay people, and that's fantastic. And I don't know whether Eytan, I think I can speak for Eytan, but he could speak for himself. You cast us. Was that important to you?
Well, I think I go with your approach where it's the best actor who should do the role. And when I saw you in these wonderful plays throughout the years, I didn't think about, I maybe knew that you were gay or felt that you were gay, whatever. I didn't think, oh, I love this actor because he's gay. I thought you were a fantastic actor. And when I was thinking of Michael, I was saying, great, this is the wonderful, exact actor for the role. And maybe, the fact that Niv is gay helped in his auditions, and especially the matching sessions with you and him, because part of that thing of two men who are gay coming together happened there. And I could see that and say, this is wonderful. This is really happening. But just, Niv, I thought was amazing, was wonderful, and, so handsome and so smart and so full of wonderful, lively energies. So that's why I chose him.
I think we have time for one more question. If there's no other questions from the audience, I will ask John, what are you working on next?
I just was about to make my Broadway directorial debut, directing a Neil Simon play called Plaza Suite.
Oh, sure, right.
And it was starring Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker. And we had an amazing tryout in Boston, a sold out, incredible run, 1,700 people a night. I mention that because when we are going to get together in a room with 1,700 people again, remains to be seen. We were about to have our first performance on Broadway on March 12th, which is the day they shut everything down.
Yeah.
So hopefully, if we get the vaccine, there will be movement, and we will be able to. We're definitely doing it, and we'll do that in the late spring, early summer, or possibly the fall of 2021. Mm-hmm. That seems the most reasonable, realistic. Mm-hmm. But that was an incredibly exciting new adventure for me, and I'm doing some television and stuff that I can't really talk about. But I loved getting to direct. I'm not as good as Eytan, but maybe one day.
Okay, we did have another question from the audience. John, did you receive a lot of background for your character as an actor? Sometimes you have to make up a backstory, or sometimes you and Eytan would talk about the backstory for the character, putting together his younger life, or basing it on information not in the script. Can you talk about that? And Eytan, did you have this kind of backstory planned for both Tomer and Michael in the film?
I'll go first. I understood his backstory just because I think I understood the kind of person Michael was, because we're New Yorkers of a certain age, gay men of a certain age. We had a lot in common, even though I don't think we're anything really alike. So I understood where he came from. I didn't, there was the half Jewish part of him, which I had to fill in that because I'm Jewish by marriage, but not by blood. But the great thing is that Eytan, the most important part of his backstory, which is this terrible tragedy that has happened, is not something that's revealed until the very end of the movie. So he had this great backstory that I got to carry with me through the whole movie without it being told. And in original early versions of the script, it was told early on, and Eytan and the writer, they kept working on it and sort of taking stuff away. So you got to carry a secret with you, and that's always fun to do with an actor, to not be able to spill the beans. Eytan.
Yeah, and it's all about the slow disclosure of this backstory that Michael has in his soul. This tragedy, this trauma that he throughout the film kind of tries to repress and is not dealing with, and then meeting Tomer, coming to Tel Aviv, enables him to confront those feelings, that trauma, to confront that and maybe fix something. And the film sends him back to New York, back home.
Changed.
He changed, a stronger, happier man who possibly can, start his life or restart his life.
Okay, well, thank you both. I think we're out of time because it's almost 1 o'clock. And I appreciate your film and your performance. And I look forward to seeing what you both do next. And congratulations again on Sublet.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Gary.
you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.